What we're going to move on to now is the next stage of the assignment, which is talking about stakeholders, okay?
Business studies is a popular sixth form subject, but it relies heavily on real and imagined case studies, and students must first absorb the language of business before they can get to grips with theory.
Okay, so what's the major difference? What are Tesco's trying to make? Profit. What's the difference between profit and money? James? Each topic has a huge amount of theory attached to it. They need to learn the theory. The theory needs to be taught before they then go away and apply it. So for them, getting their head around the different language and to be in a position where they can add the different layers onto it for the higher grades, such as an assess or an evaluation, is quite challenging for them. So it's really getting to the point where they haven't got loads of notes, because that doesn't work for them, but they've got a really good understanding and something that they can hook onto, that gives them a prompt, that when they're doing their assessment, they can look at something and think, oh yes, I know that's about, and then be able to go and apply it. So it's really getting the language associated with a situation, really, in the classroom, that then they can remember, recall and apply to a different scenario outside of the classroom, working independently. Are we talking about a bloke walking down the street with a piece of steak tucked under his arm? No. Nah. The lesson that we've just done is stakeholders. So they do get very confused when they see the word steak. They might start thinking of a piece of steak, so we address that straight away. They also confuse stakeholder and shareholder. And of course we've used the term shareholder previously, and then when they see the word, they don't necessarily see it as stakeholder. So we address that straight away. We put pictures with it. So when they see shareholder, they have a picture of somebody holding a share of something. When they see a stakeholder, they have a picture, and I talk about jigsaw puzzles, because it's all about building up that sort of picture. But we also use the imagery of a steak, so they can sort of think about, it's not a piece of steak. Oh yes, I remember that Miss told me it's not a man running down the hill with a piece of steak. So they also have some sort of humorous imagery that sometimes works to remind them what it isn't as well as what it is. We have called a meeting of the stakeholders.
Yeah.
Because
You have got a plan.
Penny gets her students to create their own imaginary case study and to role play without a script. It's a way of creating a more memorable scenario.
Another reason is that it would increase your profits, hence increasing our profits, which would be good for both parties.
It's really important that they have ownership, so they can feel that what they're building on is their own ideas. And if it's your own idea, you remember it better. So, for example, if they're doing a role play on a stakeholder meeting where they're all discussing their ideas, the boys will come up with, I'll appoint somebody an owner and they'll come up with their own ideas. I don't give them a script at all, so they'll be given different roles. So they'll be just told they're customers and they'll develop their views as customers as the argument progresses. And we can spend an hour doing a whole discussion, which then can lead to lots of other learning opportunities. So they might talk about profit and loss or whatever, and we can stop that and talk about that, because they will remember it when they've had that discussion across the room with somebody else. They will then be able to recall that much better than me standing up at the front and talking to them, or indeed them making notes.
We're worried that you won't have enough funds and the right mentality to manage such a big branch and to increase.
Confidence is so important to the boys, and the fact that they can hold their own in a discussion, and we do presentations as well, really helps them to realise that they've got a good grasp of the theory and that they can apply it. If they're just confined to making notes and reading books and highlighting text and all those things that work to a small amount, again, they've not got that ownership of it, whereas you apply the role play to it, you apply the discussion that they've formulated their own arguments, and they're arguing with their peers, so they can carry that on outside the classroom, and often do carry on that discussion about, well, but if I did this, then you as the owner, you should think this about it. And then they bring it back, so their learning is continuing outside the classroom as well, and they enjoy that kind of, I suppose, competitiveness, if you like, to try and win that argument. But that really helps them with the assessment skills, because then they see both sides of an argument, and they're doing it without even realising it. So, and then when you say to them, do you realise you've just given me a distinction answer? Of course, their confidence just then goes through the roof, and it's lovely to watch, actually. Active learning is really important for us. I try and do that in all the lessons. So there's always a little bit of theory that we have to do. I use pictures an awful lot to get that imagery in their heads, but we also have videos that they will watch. They will then do mind maps. So having that range of different ways of learning throughout the lesson helps to just reinforce that and meet the needs of all the boys, because they might be dyslexic, but there's probably something else going on as well. So to be able to come at it at different angles really helps enforce that learning. And make sure that if they've missed something in one way, they might pick it up because now they've had a video to reinforce that, or they've had a discussion, or they've put a presentation together. So that tends to work. The whole point of this is that stakeholders, they have an interest in the business. You're not going to know what that is. You've got here, he had quite a strong view and was supporting you. He's just one customer. Your other customer couldn't care less. Yeah. My first top tip for teaching business is to be enthusiastic about it. The boys respond to your enthusiasm. I love business. I think it's fascinating. And I think that the boys pick up on the fact that it's real and it's out there all the time, and I encourage them to listen to the news and have their apps going and that kind of stuff. I start every lesson normally with what did you read in the news? And you can normally relate that to some kind of theory that you're covering at the time, so they're making that real. The other top tip would be keep it real. Use real examples all the time. Do not stick to the textbook in terms of the case studies that are in the textbook. Use your own case studies. Use what's happening in the news. They're things that the boys can relate to, and that makes it much easier for them to remember.
So to recap Penny's main tips for teaching business studies. Find memorable visual ways to reinforce the meanings of business terms. Use role play to develop understanding and confidence. Be enthusiastic about the topic. Use real-life examples to motivate and engage learners.